I'm actually only going to speak briefly, and Sujin will be doing the presentation. But I wanted to share first a little bit about the University of Florida's Envision Heritage Initiative. If I could ask the students from the University of Florida to stand up, we'll point them out. I encourage you all to speak with them during breaks or otherwise. I think they're all very interested and engaged in issues of 3D digital documentation of heritage. Thank you. The University of Florida, well, first I should say I very much appreciate being involved in this effort, and the National Center for Preservation Technology and Training is a partner of ours for the last 4 years. And again, this summer, we've been offering classes on Nantucket as part of our Preservation Institute Nantucket, the nation's oldest field school for historic preservation, on photogrammetry and 3D laser scanning. So that's a shameless plug. If you know anyone who's interested in training and learning, we'll be there on island this summer with the National Center. But a lot of the presentations yesterday, with the exception maybe of the Rhode Island School, was really about the application of these technologies. But few people are really talking about how we're training that next generation to use the technologies, and that's really what Sujin's dissertation, his research focuses on. And it was something we realized at the University of Florida we wanted to be involved in. And in 2012, we launched the Envision Heritage Initiative with a much broader agenda or mission of exploring how new and emerging technologies, specifically 3D digital technologies, could be used to document the historic built environment. And since we launched that program, we've worked with the U.S. State Department and the World Monuments Fund in Myanmar, which is shown here, a 19th century Buddhist temple. We have what I think is a fairly progressive and innovative program with the town of Nantucket to create a digital model of Nantucket. Sujin put in there, he said you have to share with them this profile detail. We talked a little bit about, I think it was, we talked a little bit about the difficulties, I think it was the HABS team, of creating profiles. So we scanned Main Street last May, and we got a call from an owner who wanted to do repair work of her front door. And we were able to create, she has a second home, a summer home on Nantucket. Nantucket called us in Florida. We went into our digital model. We created elevations. The profiles aren't exact, but enough to kind of work from, and we were able to send them to her. So the idea of managing a historic district remotely through digital technology, that's something that we really wanted to explore, and I think it's happening. This is just one example. They've lifted bricks and put them back based in part on our work. We worked with, we're very collaborative. We worked with the American College of the Building Arts. This is Steinway & Sons Piano Company. I think everyone's probably touched a key from a Steinway & Sons piano. A developer purchased that building and demolished the interiors you see on the upper right. They weren't protected. And we were able to laser scan and document them. We had about 8 hours we were given. And we were able to recreate with American College of Building Arts. What you're seeing is from left to right, a 3D print, our model, and they actually used traditional techniques, measure and drew from the model to do molds and casts. And more recently, we've been working with communities across Florida to look at issues, historic communities, I should say, coastal communities, to address issues of sea level rise. And so what you're seeing here, we have a GIS center, a GeoPlan, one of the best in the country, and they have been mapping sea level rise across the coast of Florida, and they ask us to do 3D visualizations. You click on that little map, sea level rise scenarios, and you see it in 2D, but we've been doing it in 3D. And lastly, Jeff is here. An exciting new partnership that we have is with Vizcaya Museum and Garden, which are being very progressive about the issues of digital technology and how to interpret their site. So we were asked to scan the stone barge, and it is stone, it doesn't float. It was meant to be a breakwater. I think they also parked their yachts there. So we took the scanner into the water, and we did photogrammetry from a boat. And so Viscaya is helping take us, I think, to the next level. So with that, I just wanted to introduce, we have the presentation now. We have a talk tomorrow about historic building information modeling, and we have 3 poster sessions. So I think the University of Florida is well represented. I'm going to turn it over to Sujin.
Thank you. So this particular study is about, this aims to answer this research question. How can 3D digital technologies like terrestrial laser scanning transform the process and the perception of heritage documentation and training? So 3D digital documentation has been transforming the way heritage specialists work, extending their documentation and analysis to the virtual realm. Academic historic preservation training programs, including universities, started recognizing this phenomenon and trying to introduce the new technologies to their traditional curriculums. So we may be at the moment of a paradigm shift occurring. So we're in the middle of transition. Then the academia should respond to this shift. That's the purpose of this study. So I just want to briefly talk about paradigm shift. The concept of paradigm shift originates from Thomas Kuhn's book, The Structure of Scientific Revolutions. So according to Thomas Kuhn, a paradigm shift is about perception shift, which means the world relevant to a group of certain professional may not change, actually, although there could be a small addition of new things, but the perception of people's perception of the world changes. So it's very important to understand the nature of the factors that distinguishes the proponent from the opponent. And once the paradigm shift is understood, it is also important to re-educate ourselves and also other people in the field, because people tend to believe things the way they were educated, learned to pursue. So this study will explore how the preservation students and educators are recognizing and perceiving these new digital technologies and how they want to introduce or integrate the technologies with their traditional approaches and curriculums. And this study also investigates the difference between the working on adjacent sites and remote site in terms of the use of virtual data. So this study conducted ethnographic research, collecting data through interviews and participatory observations with 3 different collegiate interviewee groups. The first group is the student group who participated a heritage documentation class that aimed at HAPS submission. So some of the demographic character of this particular group is, although it's a little hard to prove its impact, many of the students are called millennials, and they could be a character of this particular group. And also, many of them have the architecture background and also some experience of 3D imaging. This is also unique character, so it's a little hard to represent a typical group of preservation students, but they still provided valid information about this study. So this class documented a mid-century modern building, and the site was adjacent to the campus. So students have a lot of chance to visit the site, actually, to take the field measurement and others. And at the end of the semester, the interview asked the students about critical reflections on the curriculum. And the second group is the preservation instructors who have a teaching experience in heritage documentation and also some experience of 3D imaging technologies.
Who are millennials?
Yeah. They are baby boomers, yeah. And the last group is what Marty just represented, Envision Heritage, the university research group who address 3D imaging technologies to document heritage sites. And we interviewed 4 graduate student assistants, and they, in many cases, they work on CAD drawings using the virtual data for heritage sites where they may or may not visit it. Actually, some of the students in the group group 1 and 3 are the same, but their work objectives are very different. For instance, the class group, their main purpose is learning skills, not only the 3D technologies, but also all kinds of different traditional approaches. So in terms of the final products, it's kind of flexible, although the class aims at half submission, but the final products quality can depends on how students do. But the last group is a little different because although it's still nonprofit organization, but the projects are still sponsored, which means they have to produce certain deliverables on time. So it's a little more practical approach. So the ethnographic research here is informed by 2 contexts. And the context one is the class project for the University Lutheran Church in Gainesville, Florida. And this context is relevant to the first 2 interviewee groups. So the University Lutheran Church was built in 1961 and is in a mid-century modern style building. And the design highlights the verticality through the steep roof and the spines, the triangular spines on top, and the exposed glue ram structures. Yeah. So the modern features of this mid-century building was kind of relatively easy for students to have a hands-on experience for surveys. But at the same time, there are a lot of challenges. For instance, because of the height, the many areas at the upper area was not accessible. Also, there's safety issues for students as well. So as a part of the curriculum, the primary instructor introduced laser scanning as among many other tools. But also the laser scanning helped to record the inaccessible areas, both for exterior and interior. And please keep in mind that the laser scanning is the timing is important. The laser scanning was introduced after midterm. It's kind of typical because most heritage documentation programs are focused on the traditional field survey method. So they start with those things and then introduce some other new technologies later, as just among many other tools. So there are some expectations when the curriculum was originally designed. First of all, because the site was adjacent to the campus, the primary instructor and I expected that students will have a lot of chance to visit the site as much as they want to collect information by hand measuring. And so in the curriculum, the field measurement was remained as a major method of collecting information. And laser scanning was still treated as a supplement, actually. Well, just to give you more information, sorry, just to help you better understand this kind of traditional approach, these are summary of the interviews with the other heritage documentation instructors. So typically, traditional curriculum involves not only graphical documentation, also narrative documentations. It doesn't have to be for something like a National Register nomination, but still, this kind of research, archival research, helps students understand the sites better. And the instructor talked a lot about the education values actually, and those values could be understood through the frame of the Ernest Boyer's concept of scholarship, and including discovery, application, and integration. And among these, the most important thing is discovery. So one instructor said it's very important for students to have a deep fundamental appreciation of physical context of heritage. So which means like students need to understand how the things are put together, not only just how the building looks like or what style it is. So in many cases, those traditional curriculums and those instructors want to keep the traditional hand measuring method central to the academic training and practice. And it was the same for this particular case as well, the group 1. However, after the semester is done, after the students created final products, the interviews and observations revealed that the students' drawing production greatly relied on the latest scan data, but less benefited from hand-measured information collected through the entire semester. There are some challenges actually in terms of fieldwork. First one was, again, there are many inaccessible areas. So students claimed that they could not really fully rely on their field notes because there are a lot of missing informations. And at the same time, they could not rely on the laser scans either, because if you have experience of laser scanning always include some degree of missing information and unclearness. So they could not rely on neither ones. And despite the adjacent site, we didn't have a real chance to verify the laser scan data or chance to fill in the gaps in the laser scan data because of the timing. The laser scan was introduced after midterm, among many other tools. So students didn't have real chance to explore the new technology and especially the 3D information. So they produced the draft version of drawings, including elevations and sections and plans. And this is one example done by a student who's sitting there. And you can see, you can easily compare the orthographic images from the laser scans to and see how it was converted to the line drawings. So in terms of digital data use, the class students group showed nearly no difference from the university research team that mostly documents remote sites with little to no field access. So I want to explore the context 2, which is the documentation for Roebuck Street in Bridgetown, Barbados, which was documented by the university research group. So 2 of the faculty members from UF and I went to the Roebuck Street, which is part of the city's UNESCO World Heritage Site. And the fieldwork of laser scanning took about 4 days to record about 1 mile long streetscape. and we got the 3D information. And based on that, we were able to create scalable orthographic images. And based on that, the student assistant produced the CAD drawings for some of the most significant historic buildings on the street. So just think about it. This kind of documentation, just 1 mile long streetscape, is through the traditional approach, this is subject to surveys that takes many weeks, if not many months, and also many people. But it took 4 days for laser scanning, and the more interesting factor of this project is that none of the student assistants have visited the site. So they worked from the virtual realm. And there were some opportunities, through the interviews, the students claimed that they kind of felt comfortable with using the virtual data, although they have never visited a site. And so technically they did not need any field note, hand-measured field notes. And they said the laser scan sources provide a reliable information of overall shapes and structural systems. So, which means most outlines of the buildings can be drawn from laser scans. But however, there is challenges as well. They said the details like molding profiles and many other smaller details were not clear on the laser scans. So sometimes require verification in the field. And also, the laser scans always includes a degree of unclear and missing information. There was some challenges, but so they kind of relied on the virtual data a lot. But it does not mean they didn't value the field experience. I think this is important. The experience of field. Traditionally, the instructors tended to treat the experience of field equals the taking field notes. But students thinks like experiences about being there, touching something, smell something, but it does not necessarily taking a lot of field notes, which is really labor intensive and time consuming. So in terms of workflow, they put the 2D orthographic images from the laser scans at the center. So they trace it over to draw the outlines, most of the outlines of the buildings. But they still need more information about the details, or sometimes something's not clear on the orthographic images. Then they use some other resources from laser scans like point cloud. And also, if you know, the laser scans can create a 360-degree panoramic view as well. And also, they got some of the reference photos, just like typical photos. So they cross-checked information using these different resources. This is also important that like instructors or many others tend to treat the laser scanning as a whole. But these students assistant distinguish these things. Like they are different things. Like they're all from the laser scans, but 3D, orthographic, and panoramic view, they are different resources. So to sum up, so instructors' expectation is like this. So they want you to put the hand-measured field notes at the center of their whole curriculum. So they spend a lot of time for this. And they introduce kind of terrestrial laser scanning among many other tools. So it's like just another tool, many others. And again, they tend to treat terrestrial laser scanning as just a single thing. And students, the class students, but however, really used their field notes, not very little. but they really highly relied on the 2D orthographic images from the laser scans. But unfortunately, they didn't have a chance to explore the 3D information because it took time for them, to be familiar with those certain type of software or data. And the research team really, the red dashed line means the strong connection between the different sources. So they used a variety of multiple sources from the 3D imaging. And also, if it's necessary, they did some individual researches through Google or something to understand the site where they never visited. So this study leads to the conclusion that the integration of 3D digital tools into heritage documentation training should be based on the fully understanding of advantages and limitations of each method. To help students learn how to use both traditional and digital tools properly, what to measure with which tool is important. For instance, the problem of the class curriculum might be the students measure the same things that LAGES can also record it, which means both the traditional method and the digital method duplicate information rather than augmenting information. So yeah. So this assumes that virtual data may need to be introduced from the beginning of the class for planning surveys in the field, even before students have a field experience. So actually, this study would not make any like fixed conclusion or something, but rather it would kind of open up some questions for the further research. And this assumption that I just talked about and other preliminary findings from this study will be subject to further examination by applying to future documentation training programs and classes. And then, yeah, it's like to be continued. Thanks.